Okay, let's get started. I'd like to say first, we've had many of these webinar sessions and they've all been Zoomed completely online. And so this is a very interesting experience for us, a hopeful sign as we look towards the future of actually being able to meet in real life together to do this. But what I would especially like to point out is that the parents here with us today, in a way, you are having an experience very, very much like many of the students here in our school, in which we have half of our students online, Zooming in, and half of our students physically in school at the moment. This is part of the Ministry of Education SOPs for keeping everybody safe and well during the pandemic. So this kind of hybrid model is one that the students here are very used to at the moment. And now you can experience this unusual thing yourselves now, where half of the class is with us physically and half of the class is Zooming in online. I think you both must be a little familiar with this as well. We've been doing it for a little while. I look forward to a time when we can all return to school, but that time is not quite yet. We're working closely with the ministry. So a kind of a warm-up question, if you will. Can you tell us about the pathway that led you to where you are now? That is DP1.
Right. So I first entered Fairview, the Fairview IB program in grade 8, which is M3. I completed my IBE assessment at the end of grade 11. I graduated MYP and now I'm in DP, my first semester here.
So my name is Parthiv, and firstly, I would like to say thank you for having us here. And my journey would be that I started in grade 4. I came here back in 2013 and I did my checkpoint exam in PYP 6. And I did my whole of MYP here and graduated by doing the E assessment in grade 11. And now I'm in DP1.
Do you remember your first impressions of when you became an IB student? Parthiv, perhaps we can begin with you.
Well, when I first joined in grade 4, it was quite exciting because it was my first exposure to a proper IB International School experience, IB World School, as they say. So it was quite different. I was very excited to see how it would go on. And then when I came in grade 4, so before this, I was in a very traditional curriculum, I would say. And after I joined, it was very exciting because the first thing I entered in, it was PYP, so it was very activity based. First thing I saw after I entered the class was clusters of tables, and we were assigned in groups, which was very exciting for me to see, as if I was in a team and I was already engaged into the system. And then moving on, that week itself, it was a very active week. It was very unique to see. That first week was very active. So on the second day, we went on a field trip to a museum, and it was unheard of for me because I've never been to a place outside the school with my friends together with the teachers. And right after that, I joined my CCA. So coming from my country, Bangladesh, we are very much into cricket, which unfortunately Malaysians aren't that much. So I expected, and after coming to Malaysia, that I won't be able to play cricket anymore. Surprising enough, when I joined my CCA, there was a cricket club, and I was excited. I went up to my dad and I was like, Baba, there is literally a cricket club in Malaysia, and I'm there, I'm playing. And it was excited too. So within that first week, I was already socially engaging myself. I was taking care of my physical well-being, and I was also helping my mental well-being. So all these things, 3 things were covered on the first week itself, and it went on to happen for the rest of the years.
Great. Same question though. Any first impressions you can share?
I distinctly remember when I first came into Fairview, the second I stepped into the classroom, there were so many posters around the wall. And this was really surprising for me. Because from where I came from, just like Parthiv, I was in a traditional syllabus and we didn't have a lot of engagement. In our first few weeks itself, we were engaged in so many presentations, so many group works. And that was another thing that really surprised me. From this, I could deduce that IB really valued collaboration and creative thinking and a lot of communication. One of the first tasks I received for my language and literature class was to create a brochure for one of the books we analyzed. And this again, it shocked me because when you think about doing an assessment about in your language and literature class, which is English, you usually think about, oh, I'm going to be doing a book report, I'm going to be doing a literary analysis. But the fact that we were able to create a brochure was really surprising. It allowed me to apply and learn so many different skills like graphic designing, which is something you'd never think about learning from a language and literature class. My literary skills and also my creative thinking skills. So I really think that IB provides you with opportunity to develop yourself into a whole person, rounding all of your corners instead of just focusing on one aspect. That's my first impression.
This session, as we can see, is about how IB has changed your life. In fact, specifically, we were talking about going from a 0 to a hero. I don't think either of you were ever a 0 in your lives, I am sure. However, I'm happy to go along with the hero part. I've seen the evidence. Let's talk a little bit about this though. So IB changes your life. That's our assumption. I wonder what you can say about this point. So can you explain how it might have changed yours?
All right, so Parthiv and I were going to be discussing 3 things about IB that we really think help change our lives. The first one is critical thinking. IB really values and stresses on critical thinking. And, just like Dr. Vincent mentioned in his talk, critical thinking is essential. It's one of the 21st century skills that we all should have. IB usually implements this in many situations, but I'll be giving you guys an example in our examination. IB's test attests us on 4 criteria, criterion A, B, C, and D. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'll go on forever. So I'll just focus on criterion D, which is evaluating and reflecting. Now, I'll give you another example. In one of my science reports, I had to write an essay regarding genetically modified foods. And from that, I had to talk about how genetically modified foods affects different communities in our world. And using that, I had to use the one world factors over here represented, which is society, culture, economics, politics, and ethics. I had to discuss and analyze how genetically modified foods affect all of these different communities. And by doing so, I was able to put myself in the shoes of all of these different stakeholders. And I really think that helped open my mind up. It helped me become more knowledgeable and more empathetic to all of the different communities that we have in our world. Next is learning a second language. IB encourages students to learn a second language. Fairview especially asks us to learn Mandarin. Mandarin, as you know, in our ever globalizing world, China has become one of the biggest economic hubs. It's taking over the world, as you can see. And I think learning Mandarin is an extremely beneficial tool that you can have for your future. Lastly, we have our interdisciplinary unit, which is IDU. Now, Dr. Vincent also talked about this in his transdisciplinary unit, which is based IDU in Fairview is basically combining 2 different subjects and creating an outcome. So I remember in one of my MYP projects, I had the 2 subjects that were combined for IDU were mathematics and art. And these are they're from the different spectrums, different poles. You wouldn't ever think that you would have to do a project with them together. But what we did, we had to create an art piece and we had to analyze all the mathematical elements, looking at the different angles, percentage errors. We had to write a report about that. And for our artistic element, we had to talk about the artistic intention and really go in depth of why we're doing this instead of just memorizing the answers. Next slide, please. Next is how IB it pursues a holistic development of students rather than just an academic base. So what I realized in my years in IB is that it really takes an application learning approach rather than an academic approach. it really takes into consideration the overall well-being of students rather than just focusing on one aspect. And like what Parthiv mentioned in his experience, it focuses on physical health, creative skills, and service to the community. IB really, really, really loves community, and I think that is amazing. So some of the opportunities that IB gives us in order to fulfill these criteria are service and action, which is in MYP. This is an MYP project where at the end of MYP, you're required to have a certain hours of service giving back, and you have to do this every single term in Fairview. Our CAS project, which is something you're introduced to in DP. It's about creativity, activity, and service. So you're over a period of 18 months, you go on and like work on all of these different corners aspects in your life. And lastly, we have our Duke of Edinburgh project. Like Dr. Vincent mentioned, it's something that Fairview offers only. It's not something that IB offers, but Fairview offers. And it also is similar to our CAS project, where it asks you to work on your creativity, activity, and service. And one more interesting part about the Duke of Edinburgh project in Fairview is how we're at the end of every year, every MYP year, we're going to a PD camp. We have a PD camp in Malaysia over here, and it's a few days, a camp. We have so much fun there. If you ask any of the students, that's one of the things that we really look for at the end of the MYP years. And all of these projects, they're really tailored for personal engagement. So while you're doing it, you really enjoy what you're doing instead of having to load like, oh, I have to, I have to cook like every day. It's not something that it's something that you enjoy basically. And it's extremely useful for your university applications, not only what you apply, what achievements you get, but also the skills you learn while doing it. So some of the examples of meaningful service projects that we have done, for example, Parthiv, he recently held a coding workshop for students over here in Fairview. He invited a mentor, and we had students learn free coding, and they even received a certificate from Google. So it's really helps us to engage ourselves in our community.
So first thing, so this is a skill that we follow. So I feel like these 5 skills, as we see here, it becomes very intuitive within us as we learn. So we train this in school, and then we start to apply it unconsciously. So here we can see the first skill is our thinking skills. So as Ishita, I think, mentioned earlier about the critical thinking skills, this allow us to understand different perspectives. So when we are facing different problems around anywhere in life, whether it be family or in school or everywhere, we're able to analyze it, we're able to think critically, and we're able to analyze the perspectives, which also allow us to empathize with different stakeholders and come up with an effective solution, which is good for all parties. And then we'll move on to communication skills. Communication skills is something that we do to present ourselves, to communicate our message or our problem, or maybe ourselves, just like I'm doing it right now with you guys. And then there's the social skills. Social skills, it allows us to be a global citizen, a helpful member of the society. So I think, as Ishita mentioned, that IB loves the community. We do services, we help out the people. And I believe this is the social skill that we learn, and we eventually apply it in our daily life. And lastly, our second to the last is our self-management skills. And this really allows us to discipline ourselves. We practice the IB learner profile of being a principal. And here we train our time management skills, our self-discipline, and our everything in total. So this also prepares us in life in a way that we are punctual, we are doing our work in time, we are responsible for our work. Last but not least is our research skill. So this research skill, I feel like, is very, very effective for our preparation for university. So we do research papers like the external essays, the personal project. So these research skills allow us not only to find the effective information from reliable sources, but also help us to give credibility and appreciate the authors of these resources and information. And not only that, in university, it becomes very familiar to on how we approach this kind of research papers.
So let's have a look at the next one. We have talked about some of the positive stuff, and clearly there's a lot of positive stuff here as well. But there are always, I think, challenges that go along with any positive experiences. And I think to really make this meaningful, it might also be helpful for each of you to share some of the challenges that you faced along the way as well. I'd like to hear them myself. Can we start with you maybe?
So we've talked about why IB is so beneficial for us, but like in life, not everything is sunshine and rainbows. There's obviously going to be some obstacles that you face. And I think one of the things in IB is that with all of the different projects that you have, time management and being able to balance everything, it becomes a bit hard. But what I feel is that when you go into IB, like just what the name of the webinar suggests, you go inside as a zero, but when you come out, you become a hero. While you experience all of these hardships, what IB does is it prepares you for the future. So if you experience all of the different obstacles, all the different projects right now, when you go back, when you go forward into the future, you come out of the IB program as a much more self-disciplined person, like what Parthiv said. You have your better self-management skills, you're more principled, you carry yourself with a poise that you wouldn't have when you first entered IB. I really think when you come in, the version of you that comes out, it's a much better version, much holistically well-rounded person.
Wow, thank you. Parthiv, of course, the same question.
Well, I agree with Ishita. In fact, that time management has been a serious issue for us, especially doing work at night till like 3 a.m. It was something very often that we did over the weekends during grade 11 and even till now. So I think this is something that we learn from. I mean, we are not robots, so our time management skill isn't the best, despite us being taught about it. But we're learning. We're facing these problems, and we're trying to find a solution from it. We're training from it, and hopefully we'll be able to apply it in our future and make the best out of it. As she mentioned, it makes us what we call from zero to hero.
Any feature really, a feature of the program here that you think is a really great point? For me, I think it's the facilities that we offer. Our concert hall, our sports facilities, or every other facility here, our music program. So for me, this would be the biggest selling point. What is the best feature, do you think, of being here?
I feel like there's a lot of best features and there's a lot of good features to it. I think socializing, able to make a lot of friends from different countries is one thing. And I would say one thing that I miss a lot is expeditions and PD camp.
Oh.
Well, that was, I think, it was one of my favorite activities in the MYP years. And I made a lot of friends who I still have contact with from different campuses also. So I believe that's one of the greatest thing in Fairview, these expeditions. They're so beautiful. I love them, actually. I miss them a lot.
They've been a little limited, lately, but it's so hopeful even now when, some of us can be here together, that we're beginning, I hope, to see the return to something like normal when things like this, we can return to that. We're not quite there yet, but I'm really, really looking forward to getting that point as well. Ishita?
I think is that in our classrooms, we don't use textbooks. We're not required to bring our textbooks into the class. And in diploma program especially, the textbooks are like 300 ringgit, or like it's really expensive textbooks. And just for the 2 years, some people might not find it worth it or affordable enough to purchase these textbooks. So what Fairview does is that it provides us with a PDF version of these textbooks. the learning style we have in our classroom is we don't use our textbooks. The teacher does an application-based learning on the board or the Zoom whiteboard, obviously, because we can't use our physical whiteboard. And I think that makes it an option it makes an option for an even broader variety of students to join in, not only those that are able to afford these facilities.
I get your point about expensive textbooks. Yeah, I've heard a lot of feedback from parents over the years about this point. Any more questions from the audience with us in the studio? No? Great. I wonder which one of us is it for, or is it for all of us? Maybe we could invite Dr. Vincent to speak about that one.
So I'll explain why the skills program is different. So every school is going to say that every school in the country, every school in the world says that they teach skills. The problem is, and I would encourage you to go to an international school and try this out. Just try, say teamwork, try teamwork, okay? Ask them, do you teach your children teamwork? And they're going to say, yes, of course we do. Now scratch under the surface and ask them, how do you teach your children teamwork? And chances are the answer that you're going to get is, well, we put 5 kids in a team and then we say, go team. Now I play badminton. So I know, and I've never been trained by a coach. So I know that playing badminton without being trained properly and knowing how to play badminton just means you're going to jump around like a monkey. And the one time I met somebody who was well trained, I just heard, if you play badminton, you just hear the swing and you hear when it hits the shuttlecock and that sound it makes. The moment I heard that sound, I knew I lost. Skills are pretty much the same thing. If you practice all of your life, you can get quite okay at it, but you will never truly be good because there is a science about most of these skills, especially really important skills like presentation, like leadership, like teamwork. And if we take that research body, usually in the business school, it'll be called organizational behavior. It's in that department. And you take the models that they researched over there, the way that they do things, and they spend hundreds of hours doing this. I don't need to reinvent the wheel. You take the models that they teach there, and then you teach it to your kids. So what model is it that you guys heard about? Was it Belbin? The teamwork one. Belbin, right? You guys both went through Belbin. Belbin is a model used by MBA programs. Belbin is essentially a structured framework where they divide people into 8 different categories and then describe the components of a team. And then there's, of course, norming, forming, storming, performing as well. So if you teach these things to your kids, you get a very different result. The reason why we got the international award is our program is structured. So one, we have 142 skills distilled into 42 models. And we teach all of those models explicitly to the kids. And the second one is that those models are used inside of the classroom during regular classroom activities, not once in a while. And they are used across all of the teachers. So all of the teachers use the same model so we don't end up confusing people. So these are some of the key reasons why we won our ATL skills program, which is called the Toolbox. We won an international award for it. All right, hope that helps.
Great, thank you. That's good. I think there's kind of 2 questions there, really. There's an assumption that IB is the harder pathway, and it may be so. Why would you choose the harder pathway than the easier pathway? Parthiv, over to you.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Yep. The harder pathway, huh? Interesting question, but I don't think so. It is the harder pathway because academic-wise, the other programs are much harder. Especially, for example, for physics, you have to do a lot more, and there's the questions that the way that are structured are much harder. And I would say IBDP is more wholesome in a way that it will give you more opportunities, such as CAS projects and everything, where other programs, as far as I know, is mostly focused on academics, where IBDP forces you to contribute back to the society and become a global citizen, which is also extremely helpful to apply for universities, because you could show that, oh, I have this at the back of my head. I have done the training program. For example, my CAS project, which was a coding program. So I can tell them that I have made sure I've done the coding program. Then IB also has allow us to do services. So I am a volunteer teacher in one of the organizations. So such things can't be learned in other programs. And I guess this extra curriculum is what is being referred to as harder, but it truly isn't. The academic wise, it truly isn't any harder than other programs, I believe.
That's good to hear. So, IB is the, what do you think? IB is the hard pathway, and if that's the case, why would you choose that for yourself?
See why many people would think IB is the harder pathway. I mean, you're juggling your 6 subjects with a lot of projects in school, and along with having to fulfill your service criteria, your creativity, your activity criteria. But honestly, once you experience it, you won't feel it that way. I've had many of my friends come and ask me like, oh, how do you handle IB? Isn't it more harder than IGCSE? But like what Parthiv commented, the academic aspect, it might not be as challenging as others, because IB wants us to dedicate our time equally to all the different parts of ourselves in order to develop ourselves into the best version of you. So the way that you divide your time, I think, which results in time management issues in some cases, that's what the parent might be referring to as the hard part. But I really think once you step into the IB program with all of your friends around, the amount of engagement, personal engagement there is, you really forget about the hard part. I wouldn't call it hard or challenging. That's my take on it.
Can I jump in for a moment as well, if you don't mind, just to kind of recognize that you are heroes. A level, which would be, post IGCSE, most students choose 3 subjects. 3. The really ambitious students might choose 4. You're doing 6. So fantastic. Well done. It's great that you're doing this. Well done. You really are heroes. Yes, absolutely. Don't think for a moment that I'm saying anything against Cambridge. Thank you. I'm here to support that very much so. But it just provides a little bit of context. A point there is that in Cambridge, you're going deeply into a small number of subjects, very limited in a way by its depth, whereas it's all interconnectedness and engagement across this interconnectedness with IB, a different focus, I suppose. Okay, is that the end of our questions from our Zooming audience? Great. Okay, so I think we can wind up there. To those of you who are with us in the studio, thank you for your time, your patience, your attention. We've loved having you here. Those of you Zooming in, thank you as well for joining us today online. I think we can wind up there. A big thank you to our guest speakers, Parthiv and Ishita. Thank you. Over to you, Sarah. We can wind it up now.
The different points that they get, whatever a student gets is actually determined right at the beginning. Remember, I showed you a rubric. In the exam, they're scored based on those rubrics. So they get all of their points based on that sort of thing. So those are all predetermined. And one of the important things to recognize about the IB is in many other traditional programs, they experience something called grade inflation. So for example, when my father did the SPM about 40 years ago, an A was very, very hard to get. But today, an A is much easier to get. And that's because the grade boundaries changed. Grade boundaries means previously you had to have a 90 to get an A. Now you need a 65 to get an A, that sort of thing. The most traditional exams also experience something called grade inflation. And that's linked to the grade boundary problem, where more and more students get A's. For example, a record number of A's was achieved in 2020 and 2019 and 2018 and 2015 by the Cambridge A-level program. Now, is the world really getting that smart or smarter? Chances are no. There are more and more people getting A's. And what happens with the universities is when a person with an A or 3 A's 5 years ago or 10 years ago goes to apply to university, and a person with 3 A's today goes and applies to university, the person today with 3 A's has less value to the university than the same person 5 years ago, because everybody's getting A's nowadays. But for the IB, remember I told you about this average point system? The IB uses a numerical system. So an A in biology would be 7 points. So you add all of these 6 subjects together, you get 42 points. You have 3 bonus points from other things like the extended essay. So 42 plus 5 plus 3 is 45 for a maximum total. That's the highest that anyone's ever going to get. And the pass mark is 30. Pass mark is 28. The world average is 30. Now, I'm giving you these numbers because it's really important to know this number 30. 30 is the world average. And the percentage of people that achieve 30 every year has not changed in 30 years. It has not changed at all. So the value of a number has remained exactly constant for the last 30 years. Now, they don't do this by creating a graph and then pushing people up or down. No, that's not the case. They do this by setting the questions correctly. Other programs who have made a mistake when they set questions try to rectify their mistakes by using graphs. The IB does not. That's called peer. Oh, I forgot the jargon for that, but never mind. It's called peer referencing. The concept is called peer referencing. What the IB does is called norm referencing. Norm referencing is referencing against a standard. Peer referencing means reference against other people. So if Paul did really well this year, my scores would go down. Now that's not fair, and that's not what the IB does. So the IB scores are the way they are. They have always been the way they are because the IB does it right. How does Fairview do it right? I can say what I want to say, but I think both of you need to say, because you've experienced it. I mean, how have we done it right, in your opinion, to get so many high scores?
Well, we're just new to IBDP. We can talk about e-assessment.
No, you go for. I mean, you're in the IB right now. So what have you seen? Why do you think that our students are scoring so high? Because there are many, many schools who are scoring below us. Why are we taking top spot?
In like what Dr. Vincent mentioned, the reason why we get a lot of high scores, I think, is the rubric system. The teachers over here, they go through the rubrics with us before we start any assessment or any project. They go through the rubrics. They tell us, okay, so for to get criteria 7 and 8, you need to be able to analyze. They don't give us answers, of course, but they help us understand the rubrics instead of just handing it to us and say, all right, here you go. This is the criteria. Go on with it. Once we understand, being able to write your reports or your examinations becomes so much more easier, and the scores that you get from it would be higher, obviously.
Thank you. How about yourself, Parthiv?
Well, hello. Okay. So I believe I would have to give the teachers credit to this, because they really guide us a lot. So the teachers are very often open to one-on-one session with us where we can discuss our strengths and our strengths and weaknesses. So for example, by the end of every quarter, I think we have a meeting between the parents and the teachers, so where we can evaluate our strengths and weaknesses and where we can find out how we could improve from that. And it's always upward curve. So it's not that we always start with very good. It's that we take it slow from, as we mentioned, 0 to hero. So if I get a 5 this quarter, eventually we'll work our way up. And teachers very much help us for that. It's not always that one student does well and another does bad. It's always very holistic within our class, and teachers always focus on that. Yeah, I would believe teachers are very important for success.
Thank you.
Good to hear.
What you may not have experienced properly so far, but I think your seniors might be able to say more because they've been in the program for more than, what do you know, 4 months old? About 4 months? Okay. there is a concept of family. You've heard the word. The concept is called nobody gets, it's basically nobody gets behind. If you ever watch Lilo and Stitch, you know the phrase, Ohana. At the beginning of the IB diploma program, our scores were not this high. Well, our average was 34, 33. We were not doing well. We had the teachers imported into the country from various locations with high track records. And these teachers essentially drill and blasted our students with every way they could think of to get the students to do well. And it did not work. For 2 years, we tried. This was many years ago. After the 2 years, we changed a whole lot of teachers. And we introduced a new concept called family. And I remember that time because I encouraged them to start it. And it's nobody gets left behind. You need to know that. So from our perspective, yeah, as administrators, we realize that the IB is hard. But the one reason why a student can go on against another student who doesn't go on is because that he knows that if he's crying in the corner, somebody's going to come pick him up, that he's safe. Somebody's always got his back in the program. And that's family. Now, to teach that intentionally is not easy because it's not a straight line path and not everybody understands it, but it's the value that we focus on. And when we started focusing on that concept nearly 9 years ago, all the results started changing. Because when students believe that somebody's got their back, be it another teacher, another student, your senior, something about your confidence to try and push and persevere completely changes. So for me, it's family. Family is the secret to success. Not better books, not expensive teachers, not expensive facilities. It's family. It's the value. Okay, that's it for the question? Okay, thanks for calling me up.
Okay.
We got a wonky mic.
Thank you, Dr. Linton. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy, Ishita and Parthiv, and to all our parents here, physically and on Zoom. So that would be the end of the session. But I'd just like to say this, even with students who are taking the IGCSE with us, you can always take the diploma program as a pre-university course before the university, right? So it can go both ways. So do explore our IB and Cambridge programs with us at Fairview International School. Thank you. Have a good evening. Stay safe. God bless. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great